there's only so much you can say about certain things. That's why sometimes I really like when I don't like something, when there's something that really
Yes.
because it gives you so much more to talk about, where you can kind of like, you know, go loose with it a little bit, because you know yourself with reaction videos, naturally the views will be higher, the engagement rate will be higher most of the time if you are aligned with the audience in terms of liking something. I don't need to pander to any audience. I feel like over time I've learned that I don't need to justify everything. If sometimes something just doesn't click, you know, and at best I can just say, you know what, I'm just not feeling this one. It adds more weight
100%.
to your positive feedback when it does eventually come around. It's all about finding that fine balance, you know.
Welcome to another episode of the Steve OG Rock podcast. Today I'm talking to Drew Fortune, who is a fellow YouTuber and metal music enthusiast. And we have a range of topics that we cover, all centered around music and life as a content creator. And we also find out who Drew thinks is the most underrated band in the world right now that you should definitely not sleep on. So stay tuned for that. I do hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Please let me know either by dropping a like on the video on YouTube or sharing your thoughts in the comments, or you can rate the podcast on whatever platform you're enjoying this on. There's also a free Discord server that you can join. There's a link in the description for that, and we can continue the conversation there as well. And now, without further ado, here's my chat with Drew Fortune. So Mr. Drew, thank you very much for spending the time to talk to me today about all things music and YouTube and the rest. So for those who are not familiar with yourself, how would you describe the channel that you have on YouTube?
Honestly, when you sent me that like little note just to kind of keep an eye on, I guess, what to actually say for this question now, I was kind of like...
Good question.
I was overanalyzing it. You know, you can really overanalyze these things, and I was like trying to think of like, you know, you have to... I've answered this a few times on different podcasts, and it's like every time, although nothing's really changed, it's like, what do I do? But I guess very, very baseline level, for anyone who knows your channel, essentially the same content. You know, I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it. It's reaction content to metal music, I guess. But I do like to... I don't... For some reason, there's kind of a bit of a negative stigma assigned to being like an exclusive reaction channel, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm very aware of the fact that it does exist. So, you know, that is technically what someone from the outside looking in would look at the channel as. But, you know, I like to venture out and try and do different things. Now, obviously, the reaction content is the main meat and potatoes of what I actually do. But, you know, this week alone, it's been probably a good example of being able to kind of branch out and try different content. Like this week, I was at the Polaris gig in Dublin. And then I was just back from London as well, creating content around those events as well. So it's kind of like I like the idea of doing like kind of lifestyle stuff that's mixed in with the reaction content, and it's all based around music in general. So the main thing is music, you know, more specific, metal, progressive metal, metalcore, deathcore, you know, all the different fun genres that are tied in. And then, you know, I mean, the way I started my channel was through like vlogs and just anything, you know. I didn't get into the music content until about 3 years ago, but I've been doing YouTube for like 7 years. I think I started back in college, just kind of doing daily vlogs and just all kind of sorts of things, you know. And then it just found my way into what I'm doing at the moment. So that's kind of like a really broad answer, I guess. But, you know, reaction videos to metal music and reviews to albums and stuff is probably the very short answer.
Well, that's very interesting to me. I hadn't realized that before starting the reaction side of things, it was more of a vloggy thing to begin with. So I like the fact that you've gone from a place of it's a personal channel about yourself and what you're up to, and then you've steered it into, I guess, a more formalized kind of niche of reacting to particular music and things. What was the first moment that made you go, do you know what, maybe I will film myself listening to something for the first time. Maybe that is something that's interesting for me and for an audience?
Good question. I mean, like, I've actually probably been making, like, there's been a like split. I mean, obviously I started kind of getting into the music side of things, but I'd say if you were to break it down into two as in I started doing videos like vlogs and stuff, or non-music related content, there's probably been a longer period of time where I've been doing like music related content, as in like I'm actually less time at doing what the channel is now more known for, which is kind of a funny thought, you know, because it feels like I've been doing this forever. But when I actually break it down into the time period at which I was actually just doing any sort of content, but to answer your question, I got into music reactions, and it wasn't metal that I started off with. It was I think reaction videos were starting to get quite popular in and around like 4 years. I know they've been a thing for a while, but in and around like kind of 4.5 years ago, I want to say maybe 5, maybe a stretch at 5, but I think maybe about 3.5, 4 years ago, they started to get quite popular. And it was a lot of the content that I was consuming. I was watching a lot of channels like Lost in Vegas. I was a little bit more into the hip hop side of things, but I never really had found the music that I really, really felt passionate about and really got into, which obviously has, you know, transpired into what it is today. But at the time, I was always mad into music. Kind of when I was younger, it was more on the electronic dance music side of things. I was a big like raver and loved all that kind of thing, loved the nightclub scenes and stuff. Gosh. But I also did love the like rap music side of things. So I was really like, I always had quite a broad taste, which I think again comes across now in a lot of the music I listen to, because it will go from progressive stuff to, you know, yourself in metal music, you kind of have like a niche within everything that suits everyone, you know. But the first things I got into, I think, was really like kind of hip hop reactions. I kind of just jumped on the bandwagon. And again, I've always done this, and I've spoken about this before, where, you know, for anyone who is interested in getting into YouTube and kind of overthinks it and overanalyzes where they should start, I had absolutely no inclination as to where I was going to go with the channel in the first place. I literally just started creating videos because it was something I wanted to do in college. And eventually, you know, if you stick with it long enough, you will find something that maybe sticks, that you really enjoy or the audience really enjoys, and then you can kind of naturally follow that. Now, that took me like 4 years or something to kind of find the home that I'm in now. But yeah, that's where I really started. It was kind of taking inspiration from other channels that I had watched, because the whole reaction thing, although it seems so like nuanced now, like 4 years ago, it wasn't really even like that big of a thing, or I guess it was only starting and it was huge. So that's kind of where I started. Yeah, that's a pretty long answer to it, but yeah.
I like it. It's very, very handy. Yeah, I think, yeah, for anyone who's thinking about starting a YouTube channel, the advice that I heard early on, which is so true, is just start. Don't care about, well, what if my first video is crap? Guess what? It will be. Like the first couple of years might not be that great. I'm still trying to get great. But yeah, if you just start and then you figure out what works, what you enjoy, and you can find the things from there. When I started mine, I knew I wanted to do a music-based channel, largely in the reaction sphere. When I first saw reaction videos, I was like, is this really a thing? Come on. And then I realized actually it's quite compelling to watch. I'm enjoying watching this. And I didn't see anyone doing quite the way I wanted to do it and the rest, so then I made that exist, as it were. Yeah. But I started with a very broad range of music, because I'm into a really broad range. And I was doing like, I think I heard you mention this on like a Metal Bird podcast. You also maybe the odd like Indonesian amazing ballad singer, as well as I was doing some metal bands and things, because I enjoy all of that. Yeah. But the audience in YouTube is like, I don't know what the fuck to do with this. Like, someone comes to your channel for Aurora and then your next video is Slipknot. What? So, and I enjoy, I mean, metal is my first love. So I'm like, you know what happens if I just focus on the metal, which is what I've done for only a few months now. And the views took a massive hit, obviously, because these big pop stars get lots of views, but it was more fulfilling, and you start to care less about the impact of views and care more about like, what am I doing and enjoying, and how am I connecting with folks?
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to it's a lot easier as well to go like to actually feel like you have a community when you can stick to a particular genre or niche, because the people will consistently come back. But like you said, if you're flip-flopping from genre to genre and artist to artist, you never really have a consistent audience, and the algorithm, like you said, gets confused and they don't even really know. So like you said, you do kind of have to, if you are in that space where you're doing a bit of everything, and you see so many channels that are still doing it, and I can, you know, speak directly from it because I did it for so long. My channel took a huge hit in terms of views, but like the channels, in my opinion, has never been doing better before, because now I have like a pretty consistent audience. Now, again, like we already spoke of, metal is so broad that even within that space, you can still have metal music or alternative kind of progressive stuff that is still kind of in the space, but a lot of your audience might not even watch it because it's so broad, you know? So you're still within that space, really. Like, for example, even using the Steven Wilson example, although he's the lead vocalist of Porcupine Tree, which is a fucking fantastic progressive band, you know, his own solo project, he's still in this space technically, and a lot of people that would watch my channel would know of him. But the views might take a hit, even though he would be considered in that space. So it's, again, even within the space, you can kind of, you know, isolate some of your audience. But you really do it if you're jumping from like some Indonesian guy to, you know, like something from a metalcore band, you know, you can really get into that. But yeah, that's
and how do you, because you clearly, based on all of that, you still decided to put together that video on Steve Wilson, I guess there's a risk that people go, oh, is he going down this direction? Maybe I'm not interested in that channel anymore. Or they're likely to just skip that one and go on. Like, how do you assess what you feel is worth going on your main channel if it's going to be, in your mind, a risk or a different direction from the niche that you've started to kind of carve?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line between doing what you just want to do regardless of what might do well for the channel. I think the beauty of the position I'm in at the moment is, and I was only thinking about this before I came on, is that, you know, because I have a bit of security now, like I've been doing this like full time, I guess, for the past 6-7 months or so. And I have a bit of security now that I can, because the views don't pay me, like essentially the views don't pay me. It's my Patreon, the community support I get from Patreon, from Twitch. So that's pretty much what keeps me afloat and able to not have to go to my 9 to 5 anymore, which is absolutely fantastic. But the point is that because I don't get those, like, obviously the more I can grow the YouTube, the more opportunity there is to be exposed to people that might potentially come onto Patreon and, you know, financially support me. But the point is that videos like the Stephen Wilson one that I know might not do the best based on previous videos I've done for him, it's something I really want to do, and I really enjoy that artist. And that security of being able to just kind of do it because the views don't really pay me anyway, you know, I have that backup and support financially that I can kind of do whatever I want, and then I can be a little bit more creative. Whereas if I was solely relying on views to keep me afloat, then I would have to maybe pander to the more popular bands, providing copyright and all that kind of stuff didn't exist in the first place, where I could actually make money off of the videos from an ad revenue standpoint, you know. So yeah, that's really the way, that was what I was thinking about. Like even the Polaris video that I did recently, from an algorithm standpoint, like, I mean, the amount of time that was put into that video, that was more like a passion project, you know. I really enjoyed like putting the love into that one. And I knew like doing a 1.5 minute long intro of just like you know, I guess a part of their song with B-roll clips over it isn't exactly the most algorithm optimized, you know. People are going to skip forward. So it's, you know, if I really wanted to gain the most views, but that to me was what I really wanted to do, was to do it exactly like that, a 30-minute long vlog, you know, probably not going to be the best for the algorithm. So, you know, that allows me to kind of go ahead and do that. And even using a 1.5 minute long of the Nightmare track that I use in the intro, that gets copyrighted. So I'm not making money from the video itself, even though it was only 1 minute long out of a 30-minute long video. But it's that security that allows me to kind of experiment and, you know, be creative. And I guess that kind of allows me to not burn out from doing all the other reaction content, which can get very tedious and just repetitive, you know, unless it's something that you really, really like, you know, yourself.
Yes, I certainly do. Yeah, because part of the risk is I'm like, how can I word my thoughts on this particular guitar tone in a way I've not done before? I don't know. I start to repeat myself. Or if you try, I mean, I have a busy life with kids and a day job, so I have basically an hour a week where I try and record stuff. But by the 4th reaction thing in a row, my brain's like, I don't know if I can process new music for another couple of days. In the same way when you're trying to add value to it and all the rest. So
I hear you, man. I hear you. Yeah, no, it's and look, I admire what you're doing as well, because like to have kids, to do the full-time job, and to be still banging out the content, like you're consistent, man. I've seen it. I've seen the channel doing really well, in terms of consistency and everything. So respect for that, because I know how hard it is. I mean, I was doing it just with the full-time job without the kids, so you know, I was struggling to do it. So, you know, the hats off.
It's mad. I'm stealing minutes here and there. Like, I've got 5 minutes. I can edit some part of this reaction video, and then I'll get on from there.
Yeah, and you're doing the podcast as well, man. Yeah.
Yeah, this is stupid to be adding more, you know, of a time sink to my thing. But something I'm interested in. I'm passionate about it. Like
exactly, and that's what I mean by like the kind of passion project side of things. Because you know yourself, like ad revenue from a lot of these kind of things, unless you're pulling in hundreds of thousands of views, or at least in the kind of 50 to 100,000, it's, you know, it's not even worth your time even turning on the monetization option at most points, you know. Exactly. But it does give you that kind of step away from the monotony of just, like you say, click and record, and there's only so much you can say about certain things. That's why sometimes I really like when I don't like something, when there's something that really because it gives you so much more to talk about, where you can kind of like, you know, go loose with it a little bit. And again, that's why the security of having like the backing from Patreon allows me to not have to pander, because you know yourself, with reaction videos, naturally the views will be higher, the engagement rate will be higher most of the time if you are, you know, I guess aligned with the audience in terms of liking something. You know, if you like a track, you know, it's generally just better in terms of likes and, you know, maybe not comments because people get angry and then they comment. But the point is that the security of all that stuff has allowed me to just kind of be like, well, look, I don't need to pander to any audience anymore, you know, really, like from a YouTube standpoint. So I can kind of just go ahead and say exactly how I feel. So, but yeah, it's all about finding that fine balance, you know.
Yeah, well, that's a great position to be in. And I think it's what lends to the greatness of your channel I do enjoy, is that genuine authenticity of, I'm not just going to, you know, say that I like the song if I don't, which obviously some reactors will do. But you can tell, though, humans can tell that a mile off. But it means that when you do say this song, you know what, it didn't really connect with me, and this is why. It's not just like I didn't like it. Here's why. Here's what I also thought. Here's my context and the rest. Then when you do love something later on, people go, oh, they must really love this because I know they don't just love things out of nowhere. You get more authenticity, and then you have more freedom to be yourself through the other videos you'll do in future, and not chase views and the rest. So
it just adds more weight to your
so
opinion.
Important.
Yeah, it adds more weight
100%.
to your positive feedback when it does eventually come around. And that's something I always say, because I feel like sometimes you might have a few albums in a row or a few singles in a row where it feels like you're just beating a dead horse, where it's kind of the same process you're going through of listening to it. And you feel like, again, you're just repeating yourself in certain parts, saying, I don't like this, I don't like this. And sometimes, to be honest, I've found that even from doing the Twitch live streams where you're getting inundated with like request after request, sometimes it's very hard to actually put together a reason as to why you don't like something. And I feel like it's always hard to justify, you know, I feel like over time I've learned that I don't need to justify everything. If sometimes something just doesn't click, you know, and at best I can just say, you know what, I'm just not feeling this one. And, you know, you don't really have to give. Now, it's different, I think, on Twitch because it's a live scenario and you might have a few different requests that are in a row. But, you know, you kind of like over justify yourself sometimes on YouTube when it's a specific YouTube video, because you feel like you need to just really say, because otherwise it feels like you're just clicking record, kind of not adding much to it. And then, you know, uploading the video, and it feels
there's
like
a kind of sunk cost to it. You're like, I've already done the whole reaction. I can't just be like, meh, and end.
Yeah, you feel like, but then you kind of over justify it, and then it almost, and this is again that fine balance of just like, I've kind of gone to that point where now if I feel myself going that way, although I know it might be a really popular band and the opinion might be not be the most popular take, I've just found that I'll kind of discard the video as opposed to uploading it in the first place. I'll just accept that I've spent the time and wasted a bit of time on it, because I would kind of rather do that than, you know, put up something that is essentially a waste of time for everyone, because I've not really liked it. The majority of the people that are going to click onto it are going to be people that probably did really like it and they want to see what other people think, and then they're just going to see you going, do you know what, that one didn't really click with me. So it just feels like, you know, at the end of the day, you're spoiling your own content to a certain extent, you know. So it's again that fine line of knowing when the video might just be no input, or you didn't like it but you were able to kind of add to that in a constructive manner, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's a service to the people that do subscribe or follow your content, because if they go, oh, there's a new video, they will assume they've uploaded this intentionally. There's going to be something of value here. And if there isn't, because you're like, I have nothing really of interest to say, then they're like, why? And then it means the next video upload, they're like, well, I don't know necessarily if that's going to have value or not. Like you poison your own well, I suppose, in that way. And I've even actually this morning when I was doing reactions, I started doing one that a bunch of people asked for, which is Knocked Loose. They had this like 2-track EP thing. And I'm like, I haven't really liked Knocked Loose in the past, but I always give bands new chances. Let's see. And I was about 2 minutes into it. And I don't like the vocal style, but I can't put into words why necessarily. It's like some voices you just do or don't like. Like my wife hates Sleep Token's voice. Fair enough. Yeah. That's her own thing. I love it. That's what it is. So I was 2 minutes into the reaction. I just went, nah. And I stopped recording. I have nothing of value to add. So there's no point, you know? Yeah,
I hear you on that one as well. Like, is that their most recent, the EP that they did, or the double single?
It's a 2-track one. It's like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what's called.
I'm kind of the same with, I hear you on the vocalist's cadence. Now, for some reason, I'm weird. And again, this is one of those things that, you know, almost, you feel like you almost have to justify everything all the time, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Like, for example, I'm the exact same with Landmarks. You know Landmarks, the French band, I believe they are?
Yes. I have historically not liked their vocal, but they had a song last year with Straight from the Past vocalist, and I started warming to it a bit. So you gotta keep revisiting, but I can relate.
Exactly, yeah. Like I've been in that position exactly with Knocked Loose. And again, this is where, you know, you can fall into the trap of almost being somewhat hypocritical, which it feels like I am to a certain extent, but I just can't help but say exactly how I feel. For some reason, I can't click with the Landmarks vocalists, but I don't mind Knocked Loose, and I would put them almost in the same category in terms of like their overall vocal style and cadence. So it's a weird one because, you know, you find yourself just like falling into these traps of like, am I being hypocritical here? But at the same time, that's just how I feel. Maybe it's, you know, it's not just the vocalist overall in terms of, you know, the overall experience of listening to the music. Obviously, there's the you know, the entire band and the way they actually compose their music is a massive part of it as well. But I think just on first impressions, I couldn't get down with Landmarks. They've got some decent tracks, but it was very similar to what you were talking about with Knocked Loose, with the like vocal cadence and style overall. It's a bit like, it's not whiny, but it's like screechy or something, you know?
Yeah, my wife would describe it as shrill, which I get. And it's the same with, like, Stray from the Path is one of my favorite bands, and he has that same kind of high-frequency shrillness to his shouty screaminess. But for whatever reason, like you and you're relating to there, I like his, and I don't like Knocked Loose, and they're not miles apart. So some of this is just purely subjective. We connect with some music or some musical expressions, and some we don't, and that's fine.
Well, that's one of those things that's, I mean, like... it's very hard to really put your finger on it, and you know, sometimes you just have to leave it at that. You know, you just say, look, I just like these and I don't like this, and that's all I can really justify it as. You know, I'm just not clicking with it, you know. It's just one of those situations.
Now, talking about the balance of things, I know I've got a busy life, but you have your YouTube channel, you've got your Twitch live streams, you've got a Discord server, which is pretty active, you're engaging with as well, and you've got your Patreon community. How do you balance all of those things? I realize you're now full-time with the job, but like, how do you prioritize what throughout the week? What is your focus balance?
Look, I mean, there's a lot of the very basic, like, I guess at a very surface level, the job, you know, I use the term job very lightly because I know people who from the outside looking in will just be like, come on. But to be fair, you know, I think a lot of people don't see a lot of the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Like it's almost a full-time job at the moment trying to figure out the accounting side of things, because I've just gone from someone who, I guess, and this isn't me trying to say like there's loads of money coming in, it's just more just the actual technicalities behind it, you know what I mean? It's more that, you know, it's something I've never had to even worry about, because again, I've gone from, you know, a very institutionalized life, I guess is the best way to say it, you know, through school, through college, university, into a full-time job where all of the, you know, tax and all those implications were just taken care of as a part of your salary. So over the last 6 months, not only has it been a big jump to, I guess, just the social side of things of not having to wake up every single day and go to an office. It's now, it's that mindset shift of, right, if I don't get up now, this is over. I have to go back to the office. So it's that mentality shift, which people are just like, just get over. But that is actually probably one of the biggest shifts that you can ever really go through. Because
do they just say get over it? Like,
but like, you know, it's more like, because people will just see the nature of the job of being, you get to do this, as you get to listen to music essentially for a living, which is, you know, it's very hard to really feel any sympathy towards someone who has that job. But I guess it's all of the background stuff that becomes a chore. So like, for example, I try to solely focus on the YouTube content as much as possible, because that is the bread and butter. If that dries up, naturally everything else is going to start falling apart and crumbling. But it's very hard to you know, neglect all of the other stuff as well. So it's just trying to find a balance. Like, I find that I can spend too much time, say, on Instagram, which is I generate no revenue from Instagram whatsoever, but I find that a lot of my time is there because people will naturally follow along and they might send you a DM or something, and you find that you could be in 15, 20 different conversations at one time, and I'm like, all right, I need to kind of knock this on the head. So it really comes down to prioritizing. The Discord has been fantastic, which I know you've obviously recently started up your Discord as well, and you know, that was a really, really cool moment, or I guess a really essential tool in really feeling like there was a community there, because before, like, it doesn't really feel like you have that kind of community at all when you're just creating videos. You might see the odd comment, but when you actually start to realize that there's people behind everything, you know. So Discord's been a huge priority for me to try and stay as active as possible over there. Patreon, I feel like you can get a bit spammy on Patreon, so I don't like to do too much on Patreon. I've actually found that sometimes I post quite a lot on Patreon and you can actually notice people unsubscribing, so I'm like, right, maybe let's like chill out on the, you know, because I understand that some people might just get involved for a particular album or one piece of content, and then they just stay subscribed, but then they're getting bombarded with notifications of me updating, and then they're like, why am I just got this content a while ago. So there's definitely a fine balance with that, but trying to balance everything, honestly, to bring it all back, it's not the hardest thing in the world, really. There's a few new like avenues that, you know, I have to explore, but it never feels like a chore, you know. It's never like one of these things that I'm like stressed about, you know, oh, I need to get this done. You know, obviously I've set myself very particular deadlines with Twitch, which is being something that I've gotten used to now, where it's just become a part of my habit with, you know, streaming on Wednesdays at 6 and then streaming on Sundays at 6. So that's, I guess, quite important. I have my deadlines there, so I just make sure that everything else is aligned around that. But other than that, man, yeah, like, I mean, it's not the most hectic. Like, this week was pretty hectic. You kind of have spikes, as you probably know yourself. Like, there might be a period of downtime where there's nothing really being released, or, you know, you're just not that busy with it. And then you'll have a week where every band under the sun is dropping a new album, there's new singles dropping left and right, and you're completely all over the place. So even doing it full time, it can be hard to keep up with that and try and keep some level of, you know, quality to the content as well. So, yeah, pretty long-winded answer for that one, but yeah, it's not the hardest thing in the world. You know, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this is the hardest job ever, you know. But yeah, there's other things that come with it that maybe people who aren't in the space might not fully grasp until they are, I guess, self-employed, you know.
Fair. Now, are most of your folks in the Patreon and Discord world, are they predominantly now with you for the metal rock kind of reaction-y music stuff? That's the impression that I'm getting. And what was the gateway into metal for you? How did you come across that? Was it through your channel and recommendations, or did you find that in Ireland somehow? Yeah,
so to answer your first question, the Patreon, as far as I'm concerned, like, I've never, I guess, put any content on Patreon that has been, you know, outside of the metal space. So I would say 99% of people over there are, you know, within the metal genre or are interested in that style of things. So that's a good thing, I guess, because, you know, it's not like I'm saying, right, it's 50-50 here and I have to try and split that audience, because that would be a bit of a disaster. But as to how I stumbled into the metal side of things, again, going back to when I first started off with the reaction content, I started out with doing hip hop, and then I think someone just suggested on a comment, and I think maybe my first ever like metal reaction on the channel might have been something from Thy Art Is Murder. I think it was Holy Wars or something, but I remember it was just something I'd kind of branched out into, and I remember I'd love to go back and maybe find that video, because I'd love to see my introduction to that video, because again, it would have been the first time I've ever actually explored metal. And that wasn't like the end all be all. It didn't just become metal from there. That was just like I dabbled my toes in it, and then I kind of came back to it off of my own accord. Like, the videos did okay. It wasn't like that's what I need to go with because of the views. It was like, you know, it did okay, but I was interested in it. I didn't love that song now, but I remember always being interested in the genre in general. I'm a big gamer by heart, especially when I was younger. So a lot of the clips and stuff that I used to watch would always have like Skillet or some of these older bands, you know, like, I'm trying to think of any off the top of my head, but there was so many of the old school bands that were included in these Call of Duty montages and stuff. So I always had an ear for it and enjoyed, you know, watching these like montages of clips from, say, Call of Duty or other games that I'm playing with metal music, you know, as the backing track. So that always intrigued me, and I always knew that I liked that kind of music. But that maybe was the little seed in the back of my mind that was saying, you know, I'll keep going back to this metal stuff, because I know that there's music that I have enjoyed in the past. So yeah, I went to a few of those videos, then dabbled off in different artists and that. And then I came back to it at some point, and then at some point it just stuck. It was really when the first bands that really got me going. I mean, there was like the Slipknots in the early days, which I liked Slipknot and everything, but I knew like it was more this whole new experience of watching the live performances, and it was kind of interesting to see the passion from the audience. And, you know, I played into that a little bit, but it was only when I got around to, I think Tool was the first band that I ever felt like I was like, oh shit, like there's
more to this. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, because to me, metal was your Slipknots. You know, you're really like, I guess traditionally, not even traditionally, but, you know, I guess what the mainstream see metal as, you know, the masks
angry
and
music,
the bravado and the angriness. And yeah, so I'd never actually even delved into the world of like progressive metal. I didn't know that was a thing. And then I came around to Tool, and it was around the time that their latest album, Fear Inoculum, was brought out. And I checked out that album, And then I ended up going back through their whole discography because I was just blown away by their whole stuff. Like Tool's one of my favorite bands. And then that just opened up a progressive metal like door. And as you know, that rabbit hole runs quite deep. So it just kind of got into then the more modern side of prog with the, you know, the gentler elements. So I got into bands like Tesseract. I got into the Monuments, Periphery, you know, all these really like experimental progressive bands that are all, I suppose, fundamentally part of this gent genre. Or, you know, gent is not a genre, you know. Yeah. But so yeah, I got into all that. And then naturally these are, I guess, some of the younger bands. Well, they're not younger, but
relative to Tool and the
relative
rest,
to Tool, yes, you know what I mean. So they were, you know, I guess the more I'll use younger as the term, but you know, and then that kind of naturally was like, well, maybe try some, you know, metalcore bands or deathcore bands, and it just started to spiral, and I started to find, I really like the poppier side of things, like, you know, Bad Omens and Bring Me the Horizon, and it just kept going from there. And you know, I'm still discovering new stuff today, but yeah, that's how it all started, man, and that's how we got to this point with all these albums on the wall, you know.
Yeah, and the real gift you have there in that scenario is that the best kind of reactions that people enjoy the most is when someone has never, like, it's like, this is my first time ever listening to Tool. I want to watch that. I want to see, did your first time hearing, you know, 46 and 2 blow your mind like it did mine? That's why everyone is going to go and watch it. And those are the first and most compelling reaction videos I ever watched. Was there was someone in their car being like, all right, this is my first time listening to a band called Rage Against the Machine. I'm just like, I'm strapped in, you know, because I've loved them for a long time. So that's, you kind of have this gift of being able to go back beyond 4 years from when you started in YouTube stuff. Like, you can go and do all of Deftones' discography, or, you know, go back and do the Polaris older records and things. And like, that's a really cool space to be.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I think I spoke about it on Burb's podcast as well before, a while back. I don't know which podcast I spoke on it, but that is one thing that I think has helped my Patreon grow naturally as well, because I do have the luxury, I guess, of what's the word I'm looking for here? I have the luxury of just not knowing a lot of these older records. Like, obviously now I've been
luxury of innocence.
Yeah, exactly. The luxury of innocence. Like, I've been acquainted with these bands now, which is, I'm almost doing a lot of discographies at this point backwards, because I'm being told about a new album that's being released, and now that I'm in the scene, I'm like, okay, this is a new release, let's jump on it. It's a hot release at the moment. I really like that. This is exactly what happened with Northlane, where their Obsidian album came out, and I was just getting into the metalcore space, and like I mentioned earlier, the whole like EDM influence from my childhood and early years of loving that rave style music. Northlane brought out that album, and I absolutely fell in love with that new album Obsidian, because of course it's naturally the two worlds colliding of the music that I'm really enjoying today, of that metal style mixed with that like EDM progressive, like almost trance music that's fusions, you know, that's formed together. So that all like was just a match made in heaven for me. And then I ended up going back on their discography, which is, again, the complete opposite to most fans that have been watching these guys for years. But then it's funny, because I've seen my comment section has grown with me over time, and people comment now and they say, Drew, it's actually hilarious how aligned some of our tastes have been, where, you know, we got into certain bands like Tool. Like, people have literally messaged me and said, like, the exact path that I've gone through in terms of discovering bands, they've like followed that exact way, as in they might have gotten into like Tool and then fell into metalcore, and then they might have really liked, like word for word exactly the same. I've seen so many comments like that. So yeah, it's been a really interesting one, and I think that does to a certain extent give me a little bit of an advantage in terms of being able to kind of go back and listen to that kind of stuff, because obviously they're huge names, and it's that nostalgia trip for a lot of people as well, so it's going to be easier to grow views and stuff. But you know, it's a win-win for everyone. I think people get the content that, like you said, is, you know, like Rage Against the Machine, for example. Now, I've heard of Rage Against the Machine, of course. Haven't done a lot of their discography, again, with like the big popular bands.
Oh, that's exciting!
Yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is, it's just like there's not enough time in the day, you know. It's like there's so many bands. 100%. It's just trying to like navigate.
There's decades of stuff.
Yes, and not even like, and you don't want to overdo it as well, because then you get to the point where you're just like, nothing is actually clicking with me at this point, you know. It's just like when you hear too much music, you're just like, right, it's I need to take a break from it, you know.
And the other risk as well is, and I think it's smart potentially, to go back chronologically in reverse order through albums, because I, for example, am a big fan of Incubus, less so in their most recent records, but loved them back in the day. But I noticed, like, my wife didn't really listen to Incubus. I was like, oh, listen to this. Here's some songs that I love from their Science album. But the recording production side of things was not as good back then. And so actually, if I heard that song now for the first time, I'd be like, it's fine. But because I have the historic fandom of knowing what was available at that time, I can then enjoy that. So if you enjoyed Tool at the start and you go, right, I'm going to go to the beginning of their discography, you might be like, you know what, this is kind of all right. But if you go backwards, you can kind of follow the trace of production with it, I think.
Yeah, it's a cool perspective to get to watch unfold, I guess. And I think the audience can like that a lot of the time as well. But it does come with that level of, I'm going from Northlane's most polished, crisp new project, this like shiny new toy, to then going back to albums like, say, Discoveries or The Singularity that people have grown up with. And again, that nostalgia emotion is so strong. And I feel it as well, because there'll be bands that I maybe have heard of, or albums, not even necessarily in metal, or just songs that I would have heard that probably objectively sound pretty shit today. But because there's that like emotional aspect tied to it, it's broken a lot of people's hearts, put it that way, when I get back to albums, because it's just naturally the way I've gone through it is I've listened to a lot of the modern metal stuff recently, and then going back, although I can appreciate the leaps they've made, and it's cool to hear the progression backwards, but it can lead to a lot of people being very upset in the comments, which is always entertaining. But that's just part of it. It's a part of balancing that, being honest, but also trying not to hurt so many people's feelings. But it's just a part of the game, really.
Honest yet kind with the honesty, I think is the key. But yeah, I have that bit of that with like Bring Me the Horizon, who I'm a big fan of, and I discovered them when Sempiternal came out so many years ago. But anything before that, I think it's garbage, because it's like super heavy deathcore stuff, which I'm not really into. And everyone's like, no, that was their best stuff. I'm like, not for me. Yeah. I really like everything else.
They're just one of those bands that are completely divided, because their older stuff is so far removed from their newer stuff. So it's kind of impossible to. It's a very fine line. It's a line in the sand that they've created. And I'm the same as you. I love their newer stuff. Like from Sempiternal on, I haven't gone back through their older stuff much, but I know the general gist of how heavy they get, and obviously production wise, it's a bit mental. But I'm not opposed to it, but I do see why there's a very clear divide between why people don't like their new stuff, or vice versa.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I think I've got the opposite situation for you in terms of context of the rock and metal world, because I've listened to metal music since I was about 13, when I was introduced to Korn and the rest. So I have had decades of listening to it. So everyone's like, oh, have you ever heard this band? I'm like, yes, for the most part. But the newer stuff, there's millions of bands that exist. So I'm like, today I listened to a band called Aviana for the first time. And people might be like, wait, you've never heard them? That's impossible. You can't like metal and not hear this band. I'm like, there's fucking so many now. I can't keep up.
There's a lot. Yeah, I'm familiar enough with that band as well. Are you familiar with the backstory of like the Invent Animate crossover with Aviana?
Nothing. Nope. Totally naive to that.
Marcus, because I know you're an Invent Animate fan from the videos I've seen, but Marcus Vick, the Invent Animate vocalist, is the ex-vocalist of Aviana, apparently. I believe so. I'm 99% certain. So I believe Aviana's he was like a solo project at one point, and now I think he has a backing band. He's live, he's playing live and stuff like that. So but they're not a bad band. I know they brought out that single recently. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but that Corporation album, I've been told to check it. Or is it Corporation? I think it's Aviana Corporation.
I literally have heard a song called Obsession, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's off
I liked it. That was good.
But, yeah. Right. But I hear you, man. It's funny to hear the different perspectives. Like you've been listening since you were 13, so there's naturally you're going to have heard of a lot of the bands coming up through the years. But I'd say you're pretty you're probably you've got your finger on the pulse. You're checking out a lot of the bands that I'm checking out anyway. And I'm not. I don't have my finger on the pulse at all. My audience does, and they just tell me what to check out.
Same.
Now,
Absolute same.
By default, that means I technically have an idea of what's going on because I'm being told of it. But there's people in my Discord, man, that are absolute wizards when it comes to. I'm like, how do you keep up? Like every day. There's a new album dropping. I'm like, are you getting any time to actually sit with any of these albums?
They're seeing Instagram stories from obscure bands and being like, look at this, that means there's a new single tomorrow. I'm like, how did you decipher that?
It's just I'm still trying to figure out the album I listened to 2 weeks ago. It's funny. Like some people just have they're really clued in and they have their finger on the pulse for everything. And some people go to these shows and their only real interest is seeing the bands who are supporting to like, you know, find the next big thing that's coming through. So it's a wild scene. There's so much going on in it, man. It's very exciting.
It's good. It's good crack. Now, one thing that I wonder about, because I have a system for this, which is you can't just check out everything that people recommend to you. You don't have all the time, right? Obviously, if someone's come from a donation request or Patreon, you know, whatever that is, then that gives you the impetus, all right, I'll spend the time and check that out. But you obviously can't verify whether a song is worth reacting to before you record it, because then it won't be a first-time reaction. It's pointless. So I send every request to my brother, who has the same taste of music as me, and he goes, yeah, worth a go. No, don't bother. Thank God for that.
Right, okay.
Do you have any system like that, or are you just going, do you happen to notice a couple of thumbnails of other reactors and go like, that seems like a positive and I trust their opinion, so I might check it out on my own? How do you have a system for your reactions?
That is a very good question, and I've never heard of anyone have like a filter like you have with your brother. That's actually really, really cool. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of having that real life filter in your brother, but what I did before, I'm inundated with requests all of the time, and that is again what I'm talking about with, like, even when I mentioned the Instagram DMs and stuff, you'll have bands that will reach out directly, and I want to be nice, you know, you want to try and get back to as many people as possible, but there's a point at which I have to just say, right, I'm going to have to come across as a dickhead to a few people here by just ghosting them, because I will spend all of my time getting back to people, and I don't want to, if I'm going to reply to someone, I don't want to just say like no. It has to be like a detailed response in my eyes, because I don't want to feel like that guy that seems like they're above everyone or anything like that, but it's just purely to save my own time. So what I did do was, obviously I have the Twitch live streams, which, you know, these requests, I basically just point these people towards my Twitch stream. Every Wednesday we take music requests. I do one stream a week where people who have any requests can come to that stream. And before, I was doing this years ago where I was taking requests and they were all free paid, like they were all free requests. So like people just came in, what do you want to listen to? And I found that the problem is that I was trying to stream and enjoy myself in terms of just being able to, you know, I guess game or do whatever I want on my own time. But the problem was that people who are coming to my stream are from the YouTube channel and they don't care about what you're doing other than the musical side of things for the most part. So they'll come in and I'm just trying to chill, and your chat is just getting inundated with people like, can you check out this? And it becomes a bit of a pain to say, hey, look, you know. So what I do is now I direct everyone to the stream on Wednesday. So if it's not Wednesday, we're not doing any of your requests. You know, every other day on the stream is whatever I want to do. If you want to get involved, you know, I'm happy to have you along. But the Wednesday stream at 6 p.m. is where I do all of the requests. We do about 25 to 30 requests per night, and we take donation requests, because otherwise you'd have a list of 90 people, and how do you actually filter that? You know, that's my filter for the requests coming from people all over the world. You know, anyone who comes from Instagram or YouTube or emails, that's their chance. So that's why I filter it that way. I did it before with Patreon, where I put a tier there where people could request a single, which I very quickly regret doing, because again, there was quite I did like, I think I put like an available, now I still do it with albums, because I like to be able to sit down and listen to an album in its entirety, but singles can be a bit messy because you can get a lot of people that are interested. So the singles, I did a few requests where basically I'll listen to it, okay? And if I like it, I'll create a video out of it. But if I don't, I'll just refund that money back to the person and say, look, sorry. And that's happened quite a few times. And I found that more times than not, I was going back to people, because naturally people, like, you're opening up yourself to, I guess, someone in their basement who's just discovered a guitar and recording software for the first time, and they've made a song and they've put it together and it sounds, you know, to be crude as possible about it, it sounds absolutely awful. And they're, you know, there's some people that just maybe, and look, fair enough to them, it's their passion and everything, but, you know, they're sending it to you and their perception of what it is probably a lot grander. And maybe some people just want feedback. It's, you know, some people just want the feedback. They don't actually necessarily care if you, like, you know, don't like it. But that is, as you know, sitting through something like, I know your experience with Knock Loose this morning, not to say that whatever I'm getting sent is on the same quality level as Knock Loose, but when you don't like something, it's very hard to sit there and put on a face, and then it's exhausting. And that's the kind of stuff that I've really tried to push away from, because then that's when this whole thing feels like a job, is when you're doing that for money. You know, that's what I've tried to really push away. So with the Twitch streams, I jump on and I'm just brutally honest. I just say, look, I didn't like that, I didn't like this. And that's how you kind of stay sane in this scene, because if you're sitting there trying to pander to too many people, it just becomes exhausting. And I've been there before where you're like almost kind of like, I've had situations where you're live on Twitch, and I have it all the time, where people will come in and, like I mentioned, that like bedroom producer, which again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's that quality is coming into the stream and saying, hey, check this out, and the vocals are awful and it's screechy and it sounds terrible, and you're sitting there and you're live and other people are watching, and you know, there's definitely
and they're
points where
probably
you're
also
like,
going, this is kind of rubbish, why am I spending time watching the stream with this rubbish music or whatever it is?
It's kind of like a lose-lose. So that's where it can become entertaining sometimes, when something is a bit rubbish, like I was mentioning earlier, because you kind of have a bit of freedom then to just say, do you know what, now obviously again, you want to be nice to the people. I'm not trying to like shit on people. Again, at the end of the day, they're supporting me by paying for a donation to get a request in front of me in the first place, so you want to be nice, but sometimes constructive feedback is also very much so needed for a lot of people. And again, I don't try and sit there to be some guru who knows all. I just give my honest opinion about, you know, what I feel as just an honest listener. So yeah, I definitely strayed away from doing the Patreon stuff, because I just found it was more often than not a bit of a strain. And then you're posting the video to YouTube, and because it's such a small band or a project, it's very hard to kind of even figure out a way to promo that for a YouTube video. So it's kind of like, for the money that it is, although it's definitely a benefit for keeping you afloat. I did that at the start when I first went full time, but now I'm a little bit more of a stable position that I can just afford to kind of step back from all that stuff, you know. And then the last one as my filter is honestly just Discord. I've been doing these videos for so long now that people really seem to have honed in on the stuff that I will like. So when there's something that is really good, people will get onto me very quickly and say, Drew, you need to check this out. But then it's like, it never ends also, you know, it never ends. So you do really have to pick and choose what you want to do, you know.
Fair. But that's also the good thing about what we're doing, is that it is an endless possibility of content that we can dig our ears into and enjoy. Like, there's people are going to make metal music for years and years and years, and that is a wonderful thing. But yeah, I can feel in your Discord, there are those who be like, you have to check this out, this is in your wheelhouse, I think you'll love it. There's also like, let's tell him to check this out. Don't tell him about all the blast beats. Like, let's just see what he thinks.
Yeah. There is definitely an element of that. But at the end of the day, it's fun because people aren't necessarily, I like that as well, like people necessarily aren't always looking for the positive response, which is what I've found has definitely become a thing where people will request stuff just because they know I will not like it, and they get that kick out of maybe finding an element of it that I do slightly start to enjoy, you know, because like this whole blast beat, I feel like I've just become like synonymous with the whole like hating blast beats, but it's just...
I'm with you though, like
Yeah.
I like a blast beat, I'll accept for honestly 8 bars. More than that, I'm like, what are we doing? There's no dynamics, but it's sparingly, I think it's good.
Yeah, because I went back after I did the whole Lorna Shore reaction, I actually went back and watched a few different creators check it out, and again, like music is so subjective, but I was seeing people cry to it, and I was seeing all, and I was like, come on, like again, it's
I think
subjective.
they're, in fairness, I think they're reading lyrics now.
Yeah, and
I think the
also
lyrics are very powerful in that one.
Yeah, and to be fair, the music, the video side of things is obviously very powerful as well, but I just found that even with lyrics and the video on top of it, I could probably sit here and still have the exact same critique, because I just, the main thing for me when I'm listening to music, although it's a music video I'm checking out, is the music has to also ignite that emotion in me for the video to really have that like effect, you know, because if you have like that really powerful sound and then the video is just helping that along as well, that's when, you know, that gets me teary and, you know, you get the goosebumps and everything. But anyway, I don't want to keep going harping on about Lorna Shore, but yeah, the point is that there's been this thing where my chat will, you know, or the Discord will like find that humor in seeing me struggle through a song, because they know I'll just be honest about it, and it gets to the point where I can kind of play up to it a little bit, and you know, I'm like, you know, you're over kind of like, it's just at the end of the day, it's just not really for me. Now, I would have said that about a lot of the deathcore stuff that I listened to today back when I started listening to Tool. So your sound does, you know, your ear does change over time, but blast beats but I won't say blast beats, because again, like you were saying, for 8 bars, you know, for a short period of time where it kind of adds to an atmospheric moment or something, I'm here for it. But it's the extended, drawn out periods of time where the majority of the track is just blast beats on a track. It's kind of like, again, like you said, it's not dynamic enough, and it, you know, I'm very groove orientated, emotion orientated, and I guess melody orientated. So if it doesn't have one of those, you're gonna lose me a little bit. And then tie the blast beats into that, it's like, okay, right, you know, I'm out here. But yeah, so there's a bit of fun involved. There's a bit of the meme culture involved in the Discord as well, you know.
good crap. But that's also, it's part of it. It's a connective, shared experience of things people like and don't like, and what people think and how they explain what they do or don't like is also interesting. I think that's why what we do has the audience that it does at times. Now, in terms of things you do like, what would be 5 bands right now that you, if you were opening your Spotify, your music player, you're like, they're one of the go-tos you're happy to rinse all day, every day?
I hate this question, Steve, man. It's because I'm always going to upset someone. But honestly, there's always bands I forget as well. I've had this question.
Or even just right now, like this week. Who's on the top of your list?
I'll say all time has to be Tool is in there. I won't give like a definitive 1 to 5 because I'd need a week to think about that properly.
I don't know. Yeah, just a collection.
Just 5. Just a collection would be Tool is in there. Tesseract is in there. Fuck. See, this is where I start to lose out. Tool, Tesseract. They're definites. Yeah. They're absolutely involved in that list, 100%. I would say Sleep Token are probably in there as well. I really enjoy that band. They're the definites, and then that's where things get a little bit murky. I would say I'm trying to think of like the early days when I started to get into stuff,
or even just now. Like if you're going on a commute to somewhere to see a friend, and you're going to put on some AirPods. What are you loading up in your earphones?
Right now, it's Tesseract's new album. I've been mad on that again. It's obviously just because it's fresh as well. But honestly, I'm really, really getting into Polaris now after just seeing them. And there's obviously, again, and this is where the emotional side of things ties in. Meeting those guys, the nicest people on earth. So again, there's that emotional connection to it. Now, if someone was to tell me, like, and before I wasn't the biggest Polaris fan in the world, you know, I've had some critiques about their older albums and stuff. But seeing them live and how much more impact the live performances had kind of gives you that like emotional connection to it. And then meeting them after and how like genuine and nice they were to me. Now, if someone is to kind of come along and say, "Oh, I don't like their new album," I'm like, "No." It's like, you know, you do change, you know. So it's kind of like it's trying to avoid that, but also that's the beauty of music as well, is letting yourself fall into it, you know, because you don't want to like be this standoffish person that, you know, doesn't allow yourself to fall in love with these bands. So, but yeah, right now I'm really enjoying Polaris' stuff. It's weird because this question is always like, the amount, it's almost like I've listened to too many bands recently. It's just I can't even think of anything. But yeah, my definite all-timers that I know for certain are Tesseract, Tool, and then I would say Sleep Token are probably creeping in there because I think they're absolutely fantastic and they're one of those bands that I'll always gladly listen to, and their new album is amazing as well. But other than that, I wouldn't have any like guaranteed all-timers that I can think of off the top of my head. I love Bring Me the Horizon. I love the Bad Omens of this world. Monuments. I love a lot of the deathcore stuff. Fit for an Autopsy. Again, there's a lot of bands that I haven't heard a lot of their discography, but they're just bands that I've really gotten into over time. Valjarta as well, in the Thal scene. Humanity's Last Breath are fantastic. These are all, I guess, completely broad, different mood bands. You know, I wouldn't be listening to these in a row. It's like very specific times. But the go-tos, you know, and the all-time listening would be, you know, Tool, Tesseract.
Nice. I've not heard anything by Valjarta, whatever.
Valjarta, yeah.
That one. Yeah.
Right, okay. You've not heard anything at all. Okay,
no. Because also, just like, if I make a video on that, it's an unpronounceable name. How would I even introduce?
Yeah. I actually I got some credit the first time I checked them out for being like, people were like, you've actually done pretty well with their name for the first time. But yeah, man, if that's you've never checked out anything by them at all, really? No.
Them or Carmen Jacka is another one that people are like, check them out. I haven't yet, but
yeah. People put Carmen Jacka under like a kind of a lighter, like a happy, like Thal sound. You've checked out
that piques my interest.
Yeah, you've checked out Humanity's Last Breath, have you? You've checked out some of their tracks?
No, I've just heard they're insanely heavy.
So you're not in the Thal realm at all here. That Thal
I
space.
don't like bits of Thal. There's a bit of a low bend to a guitar riff. I'm like, oh, that's Thal. I kind of like some of that. But yeah, there's some.
Okay, right. Well, you most certainly need to.
I'll leave that with you.
Out.
You could.
Yeah, I'm going to send you something that I think will be a good start for Valjarta, because that is a rabbit hole that is extremely fun to go down. And not only that, it is very good for engagement stuff because there's a huge backing behind those guys. It's very niche, but at the same time, everyone who's in that space gets involved when a new video comes out, and it's just fun music. That is one of my all-time favorite albums. This is I'm not going to try and take it off the wall, but I have it here. The Mastadon and Nirvatan album came out in 2021, and a lot of people have that in their 2021 album of the year. It is absolutely phenomenal. Now, it's got like a runtime of I think like an hour and 20 minutes, so it's an absolute mammoth. And I think it maybe runs too long. Well, it definitely runs too long, but a lot of people swear by that not being too long, but in my opinion, it does. but some of the tracks on that and the ambience created in it is mental. Very deathcore, but it is like that Thal ambience and very, very eerie, kind of makes you feel like you're walking through this enchanted forest on some kind of shrooms or hallucinogen. Like it's a really trippy experience, but it is extremely heavy. But it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very intentional. You know, it's not just heavy for the sake. There's moments where it gets really, really dark and intense with those blast beats and everything. And again, this is where I'll accept blast beats because I think the album just flows really, really well. But I do think it's slightly long. But I will give you maybe a single or two from either Humanity's Last Breath or Valjarta, because I think that will make for really fun content for your channel. I think either way, if you don't like it or not, it will still, it always makes for a lot of talking
points. As long
points
as it's interesting. I'm always, if I might have an opinion about it.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of fun takes. I'd love to hear, especially from a drummer standpoint. You know, I think it'll be really interesting to hear your take. So I'll send some stuff on to you after this.
Cool. Thanks, man. In terms of where you are within your music channel world and the rest, do you have bucket list items, things you're hoping to do at some point with the channel, or are you much more day to day, week to week, see how things go and naturally see where it goes on to? Do you have a plan or direction or not?
Yeah, I've thought about this quite a lot. Honestly, I don't want to be this reaction channel for my whole life. You know, that will always be a huge part of the bread and butter. I would love to get to a point where, you know, well, obviously I am at that point now where I can do it full time, but I don't see this as being the end goal, so to speak. I think this could be a very good propellant, is that the word? You know, using this as a means to kind of branch into other areas. And I really got a good taste of it this week, of being able to go to gigs. And because again, in Ireland, you know, it's you know, I'm sure as you know yourself, it's not great for shows. You know, there's not a lot of that actually run around. And again, it doesn't make sense for a lot of bands to come. But I think this week, you know, speaking some of the labels and getting some good feedback on the Polaris video that I did, I would love to be in a position where I can kind of go to, whether it be traveling to kind of create some content, almost like an after movie for these. And this is just one avenue I'd love to kind of go into. So, you know, I think if I do enough of those style videos out of my own pocket, because again, traveling to London was out of my own pocket, going to the Polaris gig is essentially, I had paid for a ticket and everything before I'd actually got kind of invited to come anyway. Again, not that big of a deal, just a ticket. But the London thing was, you know, flights, accommodation, all of that. That was not covered. So again, that's all out of my own back pocket. So I see these kind of small things, although I am enjoying them a lot, I think the more I kind of get my face into these scenes and being that guy that is there for, like, I guess the less formal side of the media, because I think that is kind of missing to a certain extent. There's a lot of, you know, photographers and cinematographers that go to these shows that create the very polished, you know, final piece for an after movie of a show or something. But I do really like the idea of being someone in the space that can provide that audience viewer, someone who's actually at the show as a guest, you know, or not a guest, but, you know, as someone who's being there, paid for a ticket. I'd love to be that face, not even the face, but just someone who's really involved in that scene, because I really enjoy doing that. And again, it creates that, like, it really gets the creativity going in me as well, which I can feel a little bit void of sometimes doing the reaction content. As much as I love the musical side of things, the actual video editing of it is very, very straightforward. And it's just like, you know, click record, talk for a bit. Again, I'm really passionate about what I'm talking about, but I'm also very passionate about the actual creativity side of, like, the videos and putting all that together with the music and, you know, trying to create a storyline. So that would be, I guess, probably a broad idea of where I want to go with it. But at the same time, at the moment, I'm still very early. I would say, like, I'm not even through, like, I'm barely through my first half year of being fully self-employed for the first time ever in my life. So there is a lot of things that I need to figure out, like, from behind the scenes, you know, from an admin standpoint, that I think without all that sorted in the first place, the rest kind of doesn't come to fruition in the first place. So, and there's a lot of that I'm still working on, like all the boring tax stuff and trying to figure out that, because again, this is a job that didn't exist even like for it's one of the most new jobs you can be in.
It's not going to exist scenario on a drop down tax form.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's obviously social media, but even like speaking to an accountant there recently, it was an absolute, like, I was going to him for advice and it almost felt like he had no idea what the fuck I was even talking about. So, you know, it's such a new space, because again, there's different platforms that are involved. I think a lot of the people that these accountants and stuff would deal with are people that are in, I guess, influencer positions of, say, you know, social, where they're getting like invoices in from brand deals or something, whereas mine is like through Patreon, through PayPal, through Twitch. It's like, you know, through Google AdSense. So it's a little bit of a weird one. So that is a lot to work out as well, which requires a lot of time that I need to step away from working in the business. You know, you have to work on the business as opposed to in the business. Like, I want to just do all the in the business stuff, but you do have to long term step out and work on it for a period of time at least. So I'm still in the process of doing that as well, whilst also trying to remain consistent. So yeah, got to figure all that stuff out. But yeah, I think long term it's doing the live gigs, trying to go to festivals and stuff, just get my face out there, and then again just going with the flow at the same time. You know, have a brief idea, but there's so, like, this job didn't exist 4 years ago, so who's to say there's going to be something completely different in 3 to 4 years? You know, that's not that long of a time in the grand scheme of things, you know, based on how quickly time is moving at the moment. But yeah, so that's me, man. Yeah, that's where I think I'd like to let it go.
Totally fair. And I watched your Polaris video and I thought it was brilliant. It was really well done. And you were very humble about, like, oh, I'm obviously not a professional cinematographer, etc., etc. But the value that you add as a differentiator is that audience view, that kind of honesty and the connection with what is the real experience like, not just a polished, slick, kind of captured video things. And that, I think, is where the value is. And that's why people connect with you and your channel. So
yeah. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. Let's
try and do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's wanting to do more of that, but feeling like, right, not trying to force it as well, because you know, it's very rare that we're getting these shows that I really want to go to and do it. So it has to come from a place of wanting to go there in the first place, because I could go to some, like, maybe more local show that I don't really have that much interest in. So it's trying to find that balance again of, you know, creating more of that content, but not forcing it out just because people liked it, because I think people liked it because you can probably see the passion oozing through it, you know?
Yes, because the other risk is you might get a band that you're not necessarily into. Like, if Knocked Loose reached out to me, not knowing, I was like, about them, like, we would love to have you come to our show and film it because we like your YouTube channel. And we're like, and they're going to pay me X, but you know what? I don't think I'm the right person for that. You'd have to, you know, it might be the smart move to say no. But at least in your position that you're at, same with, you're able to do the videos you want to do because the views are not as important because you're getting your income anyway. I have a similar thing with my job, pays well enough that I don't have to really care about the views. I don't have to have YouTube make money. I have the freedom to do what I want to do. It leads, I think, to better, more genuine content that people enjoy. And it's kind of nice to be in a position where you're kind of your own boss of your own world, and you can say yes to whatever you want, no to whatever you think doesn't work for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the main thing, and people see right through it. You know, if you're not being genuine with your stuff, it's very obvious, and there's, you know, you can see. You said it yourself earlier on. It's very, very apparent when someone just doesn't necessarily, you know, just say how they feel about something because they just love absolutely everything, and you know, it's like, you know, how can someone's taste be that broad to love everything, you know?
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for a different day, you know, a whole different podcast.
Who do you think is the most underrated or underappreciated artist right now that you think people should go and check out that they might not know?
Wow. Okay, this is one I definitely
You're
need
welcome.
to think about. God almighty. I mean, I could probably see, the thing is, a lot of the underrated bands are, first and foremost, there's an endless amount of bands, because the way the space works at the moment, like, I see so many people reach out to me, and as excellent as their music might be, it's just, again, it's just trying to get their spot on a platform, you know? So the only thing I can go off of underrated is bands that I've heard a significant amount of, because otherwise, if I've just heard one good single from them, I don't think I can warrant them as underrated, because, you know, they might be useless in everywhere else. They just might have just gotten their best single in front of me. So, oh man, I was going to say, I think in the grand scheme of things, like from a monthly listener standpoint and based on how good the band actually are, I was going to say Tesseract. I think Tesseract, although they are they're probably one of the bigger progressive bands, I think in the grand scheme of things, I think for how good that band is, I don't think they get the credit that they deserve. Now, I think with this new album, they're starting to get a little bit more notoriety, but this band is absolutely, it's like kind of like the way Sleep Token, in my opinion, were definitely that band. If you asked me this question before taking back the Eden, I would have said Sleep Token for certain.
Yeah.
But I think
they're now correctly rated.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think their vocals definitely propel them into a space that is more of a mass appeal, you know, band at this point, where and that's gone to show. It's like Bad Omens, they just kind of click a certain niche and all of a sudden they're off. But I would say, just from my own, I can only speak in my own personal opinion. I think Tesseract are still wildly underrated. I think they should be much bigger than they are. Like I compare them to other bands that might have couple million plays, and I listen to it and I'm like, wow, like this band is fantastic. They should be up there. I think they have like 350,000 monthly listeners, which of course is huge, but in the grand scheme of things, you see some of these artists across the board that have millions upon millions. And I understand the confinements of a genre. There's only going to be so many they can actually get unless they're like actually reaching out into like, pop culture or whatever. But even within the space, I do think they are wildly underrated. But I think this album is definitely doing a lot of good things for them. But yeah, I mean, I would really have to sit with that question. I feel like that's a really like...
I think it's a correct answer. I think it's an entirely correct answer. I think you're dead right.
Okay. Can I spin it on you and just you give me one before we wrap it up? I'm guessing.
I should have thought of that.
It's tough. That's what I mean. I feel like I should have named someone who has like 15 monthly listeners or something, but they're the ones that are really hard to think of.
Yeah. No, but I think you're right. Underrated means like they have a catalog. They have plenty of examples of how good they are, and yet they're not on the levels that we think is maybe deserved. I would feel that way about Straight from the Path. I think they are like this generation's version of Rage Against the Machine. I think they're that good and that important. Now, they're a hardcore band, so of course not everyone's going to be like, oh, I like this. But I think there's enough groove and accessibility in it that I think it deserves more than it's getting. And they play... I saw them like 2 years ago in London. They were playing at the Islington Academy, which is like maybe 500-600 people or something like that. It's just like, this is insane. Or they play Download Festival and they're quite early on a second stage. I'm like, I don't understand why they're not bigger than they are. Like, it's not. So
yeah, no, that's a good answer as well. And again, like that's a band that I genuinely haven't checked out. I think I might have heard maybe one of their singles. I know the Guillotine track, because that's obviously kind of hard to escape. But discography wise, I've got their entire discography to get through, and I'm a big fan of Craig Reynolds and everything he's doing with the podcast. I don't know if he's almost bigger than the band at this point. So if anything, he's probably going to be the key to propelling that band forward a lot. Probably. He's playing on the whatever, I don't know what show it is in America. I've seen his Instagram there recently, but he's doing huge things. So he seems like a really cool guy. But it's funny because I'm such a big fan of the podcast and him in general. I think he's a really cool personality, but I don't know any of their discography. So I've had those guys like on my list of the amount of bands that I need to get to at some point. So yeah, maybe I'll go and check them out. But I feel like they definitely have the potential to grow as well, because I would put them like they have that same swagger as the likes of Knocked Loose. I know you're obviously a little bit, you're not the biggest fan of it from what you've heard, but like Knocked Loose were playing Coachella and everything, and I feel like when a band gets past a certain threshold of being really, really wild, they start to kind of become a little bit more appealing to the mainstream. It's like Knocked Loose,
curiosity factor.
Yeah, it's like they're so niche, and like they have this quirky element to it. They're stylish and they just kind of fit this kind of particular cool, like edgy bill. It gets to the point where they do start to cross over to an element of pop culture, and that shows, I guess, with the Coachella performance. Them actually playing on that. So I could see a band like Stray being in that position purely based off of the aesthetic of the band, because again, I know one or two of their tracks. But yeah, I do definitely need to check out their discography for sure.
How has your relationship with listening to music changed because of the channel? Because, for example, if you're like, I've listened to one song by Stray, you could, in a normal world, end this call and go put on Straight from the Path or rinse through it. But you can't, right? Because what if there's an amazing song that you could record a reaction for? So do you like not listen to music, hoping you have time for a reaction in case it's something interesting to capture? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat as a lot of people in the reaction scene. Is I don't listen to music anymore unless I've done a reaction to it. If it's in the metal space, I don't listen to it. So it does limit yourself. Like for the amount of music I probably could be consuming throughout the entire year, it could be a lot more if I wasn't doing this. But at the same time, I probably wouldn't have found a lot of the bands that I do know of if it wasn't for this. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of emotions with that one. But at the same time, I feel like I have a better relationship with the music that I do listen to, and I give the music a lot more respect than maybe just the average listener. Maybe I'm being a little bit biased there, but I know very few people, even from my own close group of friends, that listen to albums. A lot of people don't consume albums anymore. So I like to actually give the bands the benefit of the doubt by sitting down, making it a big deal, to sit down, click play, and give the album my utmost attention, which I think is something that's kind of lost today, which is why maybe album reactions and stuff are quite popular, because a lot of people don't actually sit down or have the attention span to sit there and just go through an album and listen to the concept and, you know, try and pay attention to as much of the nuance as possible.
With no distractions.
Yeah, it's just we live in like a singles economy, I guess. Or, you know, a lot of bands just put out the singles and stuff, and they might do really well on the singles. But when the album comes out, you'll see on the plays, like the singles have massive amount of plays in comparison to the rest of the album, which makes sense because they've been out for longer. But yeah, to answer your question, I just completely wait to sit down myself. And how my relationship has changed with it is, like, when we go back to the earlier days, I was so fascinated by everything because it was all so new to me. Now I feel like that old cranky man who listens to music, who is like just heard so much. It takes a lot more now, which is just a natural progression, and I'm not going to apologize for that being the way it is. I've heard so many different styles and takes now that it takes something very special for me to actually be quite excited by it in the first place. So although it would be nice to go back to my old space where I literally was just completely in awe of everything that I heard, it's obviously just, I can't go back to there. And that's why when I hear something like when I heard Take Me Back to Eden, I know a lot of people hate on that album, but I feel like Sleep Token
it's cool to hate. I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, like, Sleep Token were that really cool underground band that everyone was propping up to be this next big thing. And now once they've become this level, it's now like, oh, they're just so mainstream and they're not cool anymore. But it's like, it's just because they really are that good, and now people have just latched on. So part of me, like going back to the Test Track thing, would love to see them blow up, but at the same time, you kind of want that like little piece of just like that band being, you know, a little bit underrated and underappreciated. So but yeah, I just feel like that's the main thing. I've become a little bit less, well, a lot more harder to please, you know, when it comes to listening to music. So not everything excites me as much as it used to. So that's a massive change for sure. Yeah.
That's fair. And I can totally relate. And I think what we do with our channels is we might listen to less quantity of music now, but what we do listen to, we listen to intensely with no distractions, and that comes with its own gifts, and that's pretty fun. So do keep on doing what you're doing. I'm very much enjoying it as a bystander, as it were. Thank you very much indeed for your time chatting to me today. It's been a great chat. I could chat for ages, but I've got to take my eldest daughter to a birthday party of her friends, and life must go on, unfortunately. But thank you very much, man, for the chat.
No problem at all. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the Guinness, my friend. And again, I really appreciate you having me on. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend.
If you'd like to continue the conversation on the topics Drew and I were chatting about in this episode, again, do please join the Discord server and we can chat there more about it. If you enjoyed this and you want to hear more like this, do consider subscribing to the podcast on whatever platform you are consuming this on. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will join me for another episode really soon.